Well, hello everybody. Welcome to episode 2 of the Mick Sterling Experience Podcast. This show is called For Your Consideration. And this show, what I try and do is showcase very interesting people. Our first episode was with Kevin Bowe. And this episode, folks, is with literally one of the most interesting people I know, not just in this country, but in this town. She is a fascinating woman. She's always fascinated me, and I'm so honored that she is going to be on the show with me. And she's going to be contributing a show for the podcast very soon. So we're kind of we're being very ambidextrous message-wise right now. So ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I want to say hello to the wonderful Sue Zelickson. Hello, Sue.
Hello, Mick.
How are you?
Well, I'm just fine. As I said, you've just asked me to do something that I'm really excited about. And being on the same program with you is really exciting.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Sue and I have a long history. Sue is, very well known in the Twin Cities and the state as a champion, an absolute champion for great food and restaurants and all the great things that people do to serve people that are hungry, and you are one of the most savvy people that I know. I remember our conversation at Good Day Cafe one day when you showed me your schedule book, and I just went, bravo. You are the busiest person I've ever known in my life, and that's, for me, saying that's a lot. That's a lot.
That is a lot. It's hard to keep up with you.
Well, yeah, you're giving me a run for the money. Listen, Sue, I'm so honored you can be here. Honored that you're going to be contributing to the show. We'll talk about that as the time goes on. But as long as I have you here, let me just ask you a few questions I think people would be interested to know, because I really do think you're a fascinating woman. You are a champion of restaurants. You are a champion of great food. What's instigated your interest in this, and how long have you been interested in this, and why did you decide to make it a career?
A lot of it was accidental. I mean,
Okay.
it really was. Growing up, I had two grandmothers, but one of them was the most fabulous cook in the world. My mother's mother. She lived on Bryant Avenue South, and on the streetcar line. And she used to go to the markets downtown, taking the streetcar downtown. When I tell my younger friends about that, they say, "What's a streetcar?"
What's a manual typewriter?
That's right, in the same sequence.
Right.
Anyway, she could make, there wasn't a thing she couldn't cook and she couldn't make. And I figured I loved the interest that she had in it. And it sort of was a draw to our relationship. So I would take the streetcar sometimes with her, or sometimes even as I got older, would take myself down on the streetcar and bring her the stuff, and we would start cooking at her kitchen table. She would make phyllo dough from scratch. She would make everything, but she would never measure anything. She always had
it's all feel.
an inch of this and a handful of this, and I try to take the things out and measure them, and it never turned out. I mean, she made schnecken, the caramel rolls that you would just die for.
Yeah.
And I think the closest ones I have ever found that are like hers are from Cafe Latte. So I'll give them a hello, because they're the closest ones I found next to hers. But anyway, her love of cooking and her natural ability just sort of spurred me onto the love of food myself. I say now at this age that I don't really cook that well. I can talk about it and I can go out and get it, but the stuff that comes out of my kitchen, I would not give 5 stars to. Anyway, that was the beginning of my love of cooking. And I give her all the credit. In fact, I did win a James Beard Award, and they asked me, who was my mentor? I said it was my grandmother. I mean, I think you can ask most chefs, and they would say it's either their mother, their father, or their grandparents.
Interesting. Now you kind of answered that. You are from Minneapolis. Did you move from somewhere else and came to Minneapolis as a child, or?
I was born and raised in South Minneapolis.
Okay.
And on Portland Avenue, and then we moved to Irving Avenue South, and I went to John Burroughs School and to Washburn High School and Ramsey High School, which are all changed together now. And anyway, it was a good girl growing up. And then I went away to college at Madison, University of Wisconsin, for 2 years, and came back to University of Minnesota and graduated from here.
So talk about, Sue, your, when my mom, I have compared you with my mom. There were very similar tendencies and characteristics you have with my mom.
I love that.
Yeah, it's great. And I always think it's interesting when I take my mom to a restaurant. It's like me going to a concert. I look for all of these things within the concert, and I don't enjoy it as just a pure fan because I'm in the business. So when I take my mom to a restaurant, she's going, well, look at the silverware. This is not right. She's a restaurant manager. She's always been a restaurant manager. She can't enjoy it. She's too inside. Yeah, so when you go to a restaurant, do you find yourself looking at all the other things that make the restaurant work as opposed to enjoying it as just somebody that wants to go to a restaurant?
Definitely.
Yeah.
I don't know if I did it from an early age, but I definitely know that I did as I got older. I mean, growing up, the A&W root beer was one of my favorite places to go, and White Castle hamburgers and those things. And so I went.
Sue Zelickson going to White Castle. I love that.
I went to the Mick, don't last. Now they do Valentine's Day special, and I signed up, and I was going to take my husband. He said it was too cold, so I went myself. Then I got a carton of the White Castles. I mean, they had little hearts on that where you should park in the driveway. It was really cute.
It's very romantic.
For Valentine's Day, they used to, before you couldn't go inside, well, you can go inside, so they used to paper tablecloths on, and they would have service at the tables and candles and little candies on the table. But anyway, and then I came home and I passed them out in the neighborhood because I bought so many. My car smelled great too, but
yeah, I'm sure it did.
But anyway, I did rise above that. But no, back to your question. When you go into restaurants as a foodie, I can tell you that all my friends look at many things. And first of all, the service is almost as important as the food.
Sure.
And if you get a grumpy, awful waiter or waitress, it can ruin a meal, and it has many times. So, so I do it just like you do with the music. I do look. It's all the things. I mean, the cleanliness for sure now, and just the way the place is decorated, and the service for sure, and then also how the food tastes is really important. And if it isn't good, and that's one thing we're dealing with now, because so many times the food is good when it leaves the restaurant when they're doing deliveries, and it's the same when it gets there. And so many of our restaurants now are changing up and saying, bake it halfway and you finish it up at home, because that's things that you better.
I always thought it was interesting about restaurants. I mean, I was a waiter for 2 decades, but I mean, all the restaurants that are successful are the ones that focus on the senses, the sense of happiness, the sense of smell, the sense of common sense, the sense of all these things that you can't put on paper. But do you find that, like I find, like the really successful restaurants do all the great things that you can't put on paper? They do all the human things.
Exactly. When you come in, the way they speak to you, the way the waiter introduces himself.
Yes.
There was a restaurant that used to, at the end, the guy would come up and said, "Is anything okay?" Instead of, "Is anything okay?"
Right.
So that's sort of what the vibe was there. But no, I think that even little things, like some of them, they put just a little flower on the table. I mean, it doesn't have to be the fancy, dancy, schmancy restaurant, but just extra little, the way the bread is presented, just all kinds of little things that make a big difference.
I find, I wrote a book, and one of the chapters in the book is called the Mancini Principle. And it's about, I didn't meet the father. I'd never met him, but I know Pat. And when he walks around to greet everybody, he genuinely cares how their food is. And then the customer goes, they genuinely care that Pat Mancini actually said hello to them. That human interaction for a restaurant, you have them for the rest of their lives. And you have their kids, and you have their grandkids, because you've created this relationship.
Rudolph's was the other one that did that. Same one, yeah. And it doesn't have to be the owner all the time. I mean, it can be the manager, it can be the waiter. So every level has to feel indebted, not invested, I'm not saying indebted, invested in the restaurant that they're working at, because that does make a difference. Yeah.
Sue, when you go into a restaurant, I mean, you are a well-known restaurant connoisseur, but your recommendation of a restaurant in the Twin Cities is an important recommendation, your history on WCCO and all of that, do you get to meet the chefs, and do they kind of share things with you? And what are the things that chefs are artists?
Right.
They are temperamental, they are romantic, they are all these things.
And human.
And yeah, and that's what makes them brilliant. So what are the tendencies and the characteristics that you see, that you want to see in a chef, that you know that chef's going to be great?
Well, the one thing in the restaurant business, or really any business, you have to have passion for what you're doing. Just like you with your singing and your musical things that you do, you have a passion for the whole package. You can't. Some of them are maybe higher than other levels, but I think that the same in the restaurant business. If a chef and everyone that he's working with has this passion for the business, and I think maybe I'm having a blank on her name, but Joni, who owns Young Joni, and Young Joni's own. Anyway, if your whole staff has your philosophy and you treat them like they're human beings, it goes off into the restaurant people that come there.
Yes.
The client, right. And so, and Kim does that. In fact, I remember one night going late to one of her restaurants, and the waitress kept saying how she had worked there since the day they had opened. It was a restaurant in South Minneapolis, and it was so interesting to see the dedication, and the feeling was like it was her restaurant because she'd been there so often. It was late at night. I think we were the last ones in there, and you could just feel the passion, and you felt you were part of it because she was part of it.
You know, kind of what you were just saying reminds me of, did you ever watch The Sopranos?
Yes.
Well, do you remember the one episode at the end where it's raining outside and Arnie opens up the restaurant for them? There's nobody there and they have no food because the power's off, but he comes up with some meal. He did it for them, and it became this really great family moment. They have history at the restaurant. The chef extended himself to make that family feel important. Right. That kind of relationship. That's what that reminded me of.
It makes you feel ownership or partnership or family. Yeah, right. That does make a big difference.
Yes.
But also, I feel that the chefs that really love what they're doing, it just emulates through the whole place. I mean, if they're not there just for a check in and check out. And that's what we're finding now in Minnesota more than ever.
Yeah.
All the ethnic sick restaurants that are popping up, you can feel the grandma's hand in there all the time.
That's great. Let's talk about our city, the city that you and I love, the city that has provided us many blessings, professional blessings, personal blessings. It's a wonderful, wonderful city. I think that you and I would both agree our city is wounded from George Floyd, from this pandemic, from downtown basically being a ghost town at this moment. And it's going to be very difficult, I think. And I'm an optimistic person, as you are. But there's going to be some very high hurdles that need to be jumped over to get this city back. And restaurants and food will be a huge part of that. How are you feeling about what's happened the last year with both of those things in our city?
Every day you read about another stalwart restaurant that's closing, and it's been here for years,
yes.
and that people just love. In fact, today just hearing about Birch's closing.
Oh, brutal. That's brutal.
Sad. There were two restaurants, the upstairs and the downstairs. They were running two restaurants, a husband and wife, so it's a family-owned restaurant. Yeah. And they really did. I mean, that was Birch's Pharmacy for years, and all of a sudden it was a fabulous restaurant. Well, luckily, they have two other restaurants, and I've just heard the news too, and nobody's saying what happened to the other two that they have. But I hope that they can save those two and keep those two. It's heartbreaking, but when you look at the statistics of what's happened to them and what they've had to put up with for the last almost year, just changing around, the whole thing being closed and then having to buy all the packaging to do takeout and delivery, and it's amazing. It's not even jumps, it's somersaults what they've had to do.
Yes.
And hopefully, what I look at now, and when you hear all these new ones that are opening, I mean, there are maybe 4 or 5 weeks of new ones that are popping up. Some that I've never heard of before, and some that you hear that have been in the works for a while. But hopefully, like you said, looking optimistically, it's got to come back. I mean, this is a strong city, and so many people that have moved here said, something when you say in the wintertime, why do we live here? And then you come out, they read it to the piece on CCO, somebody was asking, why do we live here? And many people came back because of the quality of life. Yeah. And sure, we have below zero weather for a couple of weeks, and we have crime, and we have this and we have that, but we also have a good quality of life and people that are survivors. I mean, just to hear what's going on in Texas now, and to hear all the hurricanes, tornadoes, things that are going on, we've got to come back. But right now, as you say, downtown is really sad.
It's. Have any restaurants reached out to you for any advice on how to get through this? I mean, since you're so knowledgeable about so many aspects of it.
Yeah, well, I've been working with some of the people from Food Service News. Nancy Weingartner Monroe and her husband are doing some things with a lot of chefs, and many of our chefs here are gathering together to work on items which we're going to talk about on my first podcast, which I do tomorrow with you, like for Second Harvest and Loaves and Fishes. These are all supported by chefs. Many of them who are out of business now are coming to work for the nonprofits and helping to get the food out to the people who are food insecure. Mm-hmm. So that's how our city comes together. I mean, it's amazing. It's wonderful. And when you say the future, we've got to think about positive ways that we can help the people. And I'm going to tell you a little story, and I hope it goes somewhere, and maybe from this talk with you and I. There was a chef a president of Macy's that was here from Washington, D.C. His name was Frank Gazzetta. And remember, it went from Dayton's to Marshall Field's, and then to Macy's in a few years. Mm-hmm. Dayton's changed. So one day I was walking through Macy's, and I look up and I see a new chef doing demonstrations in the lower level. And I said, "Oh, who's this new chef that I don't know about?" And they said, "Oh, he's not a chef. He's the president of the store, of the company." And he had taken over, but he was an Italian guy. His name was Frank Gazzetta. He loved to cook and he loved to eat. And I got to be very friendly with him. And it was sad when he left here because he got involved in the community. He joined all the organizations and was supportive of everything. And he loved to eat. And he was a good cook. So anyway, he left and he moved back to Washington when Macy's closed. When Macy's, something happened. Yeah, when it was still Macy's. Anyway, so I talked to him a couple of weeks ago, and he came up with this idea, and you might like this too, that there are many small restaurants, many restaurants in this town that just can't make it. And he said he's had this idea, if I was only younger, I would start this, to have people come and adopt a restaurant. Instead of being a partner and invest in something. If you invest in something, you feel you've got control of it, and you can tell the people what to do. If something is good. But if you adopt something, it's more like a caretaker thing. So if we had people that would like to be involved in a restaurant, they would adopt it, give it some money to help it survive or to revive itself, and then could maybe get some perks like maybe free meals or something like that. But they wouldn't be the takeover.
You're sponsoring the restaurant.
Sponsoring, right.
The restaurant is an event that you sponsor. That's right. A brilliant idea.
It is a brilliant idea. I said, will you move back here? And he says, I'm too old to do this now. I said, well, maybe we'll find a way to get you back.
That's a brilliant idea.
I thought it was too. And so I've talked to Nancy and to Dennis about it, and maybe this is something that can bloom. And that's again about how my life's been. I get an idea and then maybe just put it together and it works. And that's how we started the Charlie Awards and a few other things.
I was just going to ask you about that. That's a lovely segue, Sue. So, how long have you been doing the Charlie Awards?
I think this is the 10th year. We skipped a year when we changed from the different format and time of the year. So I think will be the 10th year, but it probably will be virtual if we do it.
Right. Explain to people what the Charlie Awards is.
Here's the background of the Charlie Awards. You remember the Ivy Awards?
Yes.
Okay, so the Ivy Awards were a big award event every year that Scott Mayer put together for the arts, for all the theaters. We have many theaters. So we don't have many restaurants. We have many restaurants. We also have many theaters and many musical event places. I mean, we're known for many things in the Twin Cities. And so I walked out one night after the Ivy Awards, and Scott was in the hallway, and I was walking out with R.T. Ryback, and I went up to her and I said, so why don't we ever do this for the restaurant industry? Because it was a night when you honored the people in the theater, and they didn't have to work, well, they did help put on the show, but it wasn't a show of their own, it was a show for each other.
Sure.
And so this would be a night that all the restaurateurs and the chefs could come, and they wouldn't have to work, except we have to use the school kids now to make the food. But anyway, they would all come, and they would be honored. Well, it turned out it was like a junior James Beard Award, because it got to be just so fabulous and so fun. And the first few years, we gathered you to be the voice of God. So you had your wonderful voice telling the people when they should come on stage.
That's right. I did that one, yes.
You were the voice of God.
Yeah.
You are.
I just want to say I didn't call myself that. I'm just,
No,
I was just some guy.
I know that's sacred, okay, but you are. So anyway, and it really turned out to be exciting. We would have parties. The party was catered by the schools, from the culinary schools, when we had so many culinary schools here. And they loved meeting the chefs, and the chefs loved meeting them, and it was a good connecting and networking for everybody. We had it at many places, but it ended up at the Pantages.
Yes.
And that was where we had the show. But in the meantime, we had different things during the year where we had sort of seminars and talks about the food industry and gathering the chefs. It was a camaraderie thing, and I'm saying was because this year it's been a little difficult to pull it all together. But we will do it. We'll continue it. It's something that will continue.
Won't it be interesting to see how the Charlie Awards evolves after all of this? You know, restaurants are evolving into different animals. You know, everything is going to be modified. It'd be interesting to see what happens with the Charlie Awards. What actual awards are given? They may add some different awards.
Right. The reason not doing them this year is because so many of the restaurants are in flux.
Yeah.
They're not open. It's heartbreaking. It really is.
Yeah, it really is. It really is.
So that many of the other organizations are going to doing things online, just like we're doing right now.
Yeah.
So virtual living.
So Sue, I know that you have had some health issues in the last few years. You look fantastic. You feel like looks like you got tons of energy. And everybody is grateful for that. You are a very motivated person. You're one of the most motivated people that I've ever met, and that you're very inspiring to me. What is it when you wake up every day? What is the thing that motivates you to do all of the things that you do? Because it can't be financial. I'm sure most of the things you do have nothing to do with finances, but it's your passion. What is that passion?
Fortunately, I've got a great husband that has aborted many of these crazy ideas.
Yes.
But I do feel that I used to always say you've got to have something to get out of bed for.
Yes.
I mean, everyone has to have a purpose. I mean, I'm talking to one who knows exactly what I'm saying.
Yes.
Because you've done it in so many different ways. I mean, music is your, what did you used to say? Music is your gig, or music is your something you had to say that you said. But what about the 30-day foundation and every single turn that you do for people all over? And that's an interview I want to do with you.
And we'll do that. We'll do that. I'm looking forward to talking to you on that.
Because, as I read more about it recently, when I went to talk to you about it, it's amazing how many people you have helped.
Thank you.
Silently and not with a big splash. You just do it quietly, and it's amazing.
Well, thank you. Well, Sue, let's talk about your upcoming show on the Mick Sterling Experience podcast. You're going to be shooting it tomorrow. Right. The show, if I may say the name of the show, if that's okay.
That's just
It's going to be called A Taste with Sue Zelickson, which I think it's a huge name. It's great. Talk about what you're going to be talking about on the show tomorrow and who you're going to be talking to.
Well, you asked me to use the people that I know and love and have done wonderful things in the community. And I have met many fabulous people through the crazy things that I've been doing in these past 80 years. But it was my idea maybe to ask people, and not just females, it can be males and females, it could be anybody, of how they got to what they're doing. Sort of like, these are people that are involved in the food industry, and that's why you asked me mostly, but we can stretch it a little bit. But this way, it will start tomorrow. I'm going to start with Kathy Mays, who is the CEO of Loaves and Fishes.
Amazing.
crazy, wonderful lady. She's
Yes.
become one of my dearest friends,
Yep.
and we just met on a fluke. I mean, that was the one thing that you said what motivates me. Every time you leave the house and go and do something, you learn something or you meet somebody and that enriches your life. I mean, if you sit at home and read all the time, nothing's going to happen.
But you know what, though? That is true. But the other side of it is when you walk out of the house, someone has to be open to experiencing those new things. If you're not open to it, you're not going to meet anybody.
Right,
That's one of your lovely gifts. You are open to new experiences. That's huge.
Right, you have to be. You can't go tunnel vision. That
Yes.
doesn't work. But anyway, and so Kathy, I got to meet first. I think I met her. She had asked me to give a talk at one of the Loaves and Fishes events, which were fabulous, on one of the farms they were running for Loaves and Fishes. And I had known Loaves and Fishes years ago when it was just tin cans. That's all we give tin cans to people. And now there's now the tin can and what they give away. And also it was now they're feeding. Well, they had to do a turnaround, which you'll learn to do. Listen to it next week completely with what they're doing.
Yes, yeah.
And then also with Allison O'Toole, who my husband knew before I did, but was a good friend of Kathy's that she met, and they were working together for Second Harvest and Loaves and Fishes, and many other of the food industries are working together. The nonprofits are working together rather apart. And I'm old enough to remember when they didn't work together. And so this is just a blessing how that they are supporting each other.
It's a huge blessing when nonprofits work together. To me, there's no room for competitiveness on this.
Right, exactly.
We're all trying to do the same thing, trying to help people.
Right. And when I started this kids cafe in St. Louis Park, the Loaves and Fishes and the 12 Baskets and the ICs, they've all been helpful in giving us guidance and helping with foods. And many of them nonprofits couldn't work if they didn't have it together. So anyway, that's going to be my first one. And then I've got another couple. I'll maybe try to do ones or twos at a time, but two Anns. In fact, I should get another Ann too, but Ann Ahmed and Ann Spaeth are two restaurateurs, women restaurateurs with Lat 14 and Lynn Hall.
Right.
And the way they've turned around in this pandemic, it's really amazing, and how they change on a like they say on a dime or something when you turn around on a dime. But they're doing wonderful things and creative things. In fact, Ann Ahmed is now just going to open her third restaurant, which is just amazing.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, 2020 should be called the year of making lemonade, from lemons. The year of making lemonade.
Lemonade. We got enough lemons.
Everybody's had to learn how to make lemonade in this thing. And well, listen, Sue, first of all, I'm honored to call you my friend. I think you're fabulous. I don't use the word fabulous very often, but you are fabulous.
We missed on how I met you.
Oh, that's right. Okay, well, tell the story.
That's how I met Mick. Like 30 years ago, right? You were doing a gig at the Mall of America, and I was out there working on some project, either a fashion show or something like that, and I heard this voice in my ear. I thought, what is this? And I didn't even know where you were, and I followed the voice to where it was. And there I found you, and then I just was like a groupie. I was following you all.
That was for Camp Heartland. That was Heart and Soul back in those days.
That's right, yeah.
Oh my goodness, yeah. Well,
I love your voice, and I dragged my husband out to see you. No, and you're still great. Then I tell you how you should dress and what you should do.
I know. I shouldn't be wearing a jacket right now, according to you.
I know. That was one of when your mother was there too.
Oh my goodness. Well, listen, Sue, it's an honor to have you on the show. I really want people to see. I know there's so many people that love you. I hope when you tell people that you're on the show, they come and see you. But obviously, I want new people to see who you are. I think you are, such an important part of Minneapolis in the culture and food and arts and broadcasting. Everybody knows who you are, but the fact that that we're friends and you're doing so much and you're so motivated to keep doing things should be an inspiration to anybody that is wanting to do something. I think you're an amazing woman, and I can't wait to see your show and for multiple shows that you do on the Mick Sterling Experience podcast.
Ditto right back to you. And I also wanted to interview you so everybody knows all the subliminal things that you keep doing.
That's right.
More than just singing. In fact, last week I said to you, how do you know the words to all those songs? And what did you tell me? I wrote written on the floor. I don't see you looking down on the floor.
I know. Well, it's tricks of the trade.
You got lots of tricks.
Yeah. Well, honey, it is wonderful to see you again. I'm so glad we could do this. Thank you so much for being on the second episode of For Your Consideration on the Mick Sterling Experience podcast. I can't wait to see your show.
Thanks for considering me.
Of course. Be well, my friend. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Well, there you go, folks. She is legendary and she is lovely. Lovely and legendary. That's a great, great combination. Sue Zelickson, restaurant champion, and on the Mick Sterling Experience podcast on the show For Your Consideration. Watch for more shows coming up. We're going to be adding new content weekly, all kinds of different shows. Thanks for joining us, and we will see you again. Thank you, Sue. That was great.